So I think we are live. Good day, everybody. My name is Chris Poria. Welcome to Early Birds Weekly Explorer webinar. This webinar series is run by Early Birds team to promote disruptive leaders, especially innovators, mostly focused on startups, scale-ups who have a minimum viable product or more. We believe sometimes it is not the product that brings benefits and the change required in any industry or business. Sometimes it is the passionate people, especially subject matter experts, who are the key change agents. These people bring transformation across our communities and industries. And today our guest is one of those leaders. Let's welcome Scott Weiss. Scott is a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow and a former IDEO organization and system designer. Scott is currently applying human-centered design, civic innovations practices, and community organizing towards solving systematic social challenges. Scott has been partnering with creative and passionate client teams across sectors, communities of faith and industries. He helps delivering innovative, strategic, and impact-driven solutions to a wide variety of complex challenges. Some of his partners include Harvard University, the United Nations, the City of New York, the UGA Federation, and the Skoll Foundation. Today, Scott is going to share his experience on how human-centered design can solve systemic social challenges. So Scott will present around 20 to 25 minutes, and then we will open for questions. You can type your questions through the chat box, or you can speak when we are open for questions. So Scott, welcome to the webinar, and handing over to you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to Early Birds for inviting me today. I'm really honored. I'm here at a very rainy evening in Washington, D.C. So yeah, very excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you all. And before I begin, I'd just love to offer a few things. One is I don't vanish after this presentation. So if you want to reach out and have some burning questions that you want to raise with me, I'm pretty accessible. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I know that Chris and Jeff are comfortable sharing my email. The other thing I'd like to just mention is a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is from a U.S. government perspective, but I feel like a lot of the themes that I've learned through this work in U.S. government are quite universal. So I'm sure that they'll resonate with you, even if the very specific case studies aren't particularly familiar. And the way I've been starting all these presentations for the past year and a half has really been with this question. How are you? It's been a pretty emotionally fraught and charged year and a half. You know, we've all been navigating COVID life, you know, with different levels of stress and skill. And so I am here to just name and claim that I know it's been a hard year. And for me, beyond how it has affected me kind of on a personal level, I think it has revealed a lot. And that's really what the core of my talk is. And my sort of revelation this past year was that, you know, when our federal services and state services needed to respond to a crisis, an intersection of crises, we weren't really prepared. And I think it revealed a lot of pretty stark socioeconomic disparities in all societies, not just US society. So really the big clarion call for all of you and what I've been posing to all audiences is that I really feel in all earnestness that we need a public service movement, and that we really need to rethink how design shows up in that and how we can collaborate more effectively to solve systemic social challenges. I want to share a bit with you before I dive in about my history and what kind of led to my arrival in public service design and in federal government. So as Chris mentioned earlier, I became really aware of design when I was working at IDEO in late 2009. And what was so profound about my experience working there was that I learned a whole entirely new language of design, and really the core of human-centered design is this idea that solutions are possible. And that was really inspiring to me, and that if you sort of applied this methodology towards some of these challenges, that really actionable and tangible solutions will come out on the other side. The majority of my portfolio at IDEO was within their organizational design practice. So helping organizations of all shapes and sizes really become more design-led and more innovative, and really help to give them the tools to help them really rethink the processes they use towards innovation practices. And we really help them think how that sort of connects to their culture and their community and their business and strategy. My last year at IDEO, I was privileged to work on a project that looked at the aging and dying experience in American society. And that's when I really became aware of this idea of systems level design and how interconnected social systems influence or impact a human experience. And from that moment on, all I wanted to do was work on projects that sort of sat at the intersection of human-centered design and social impact. So I moved back east and co-founded a social innovation consulting firm called Community by Design. And as Chris mentioned earlier in the intro, that was really looking at how a collective across industries could sort of come together to solve some really pretty sticky challenges. So as Chris mentioned, I worked with Harvard to help them stand up a social impact institute focused on the public school system in the United States. And and through the sort of that portfolio of projects I worked on at Community by Design, it really got me curious about this notion of impact and were we delivering impact at the level we truly wanted and talked about. And as an antidote to that, I became aware of a program that takes subject matter experts and brings them into the federal space to work with government leaders to solve systemic social challenges. And what was so exciting for me about that is this realization that there's no greater lever of impact, certainly in our society, than federal government. So that's sort of what I've been up to over the past year and a half, and I'll get into more case studies. But essentially, the driving question around all of this work since I was at IDEO and been really trying to better understand how it works in practice is, how can human-centered design solve systemic social challenges? And that's really my question for all of us today. And I think based on what I've observed, there's real opportunity to use this as an engine for change. And I'll explain a bit more, as we unpack this bit. And while I mentioned the sort of collective impact that's needed to address some of these social challenges, it really starts with values. And I think that's what resonated with me so much about human-centered design, is that underlying this process are values that really resonated with me, and I think could be applied to really all of the work that you do, and all of the sort of the mindset and approach you bring to your work. So I truly believe this is as a core value. This is a David Kelly ism. In that his philosophy, which I agree with, is that everyone's a designer. Lowercase d, obviously there's uppercase D design craft, like industrial design and interaction design, UX, UI. But lowercase d design is really about just tapping into creative confidence and really diving into the process. So optimism is probably the most powerful of all, and again, it's belief in the art of the possible. And that I love this image on the lower left of this is the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, kind of imagining this future where human flight was a possibility. So that really gives me goosebumps when I think about it. This is the secret sauce really in design. Design is only as good as how deeply you understand the experiences of people navigating the system, services, and products you're trying to create for them. So that is something that certainly in public service is core to delivering, valuable products and services. Inclusivity is a huge one. And when I say that, I don't just mean inclusivity in terms of the users, the cross-section of users that you want to learn from, as you are navigating some of these design challenges, but really the teams that you're working on as well, that ensuring that there's a cross-section of backgrounds and areas of expertise and ethnicity and racial diversity. Those, like that blender of perspectives leads to richer outcomes, I found in my work as a designer. Embrace ambiguity. So we often as designers go into challenges where we have no idea what is going to come out on the other side. We have to just have faith that the system, this process that we're using, that if we're using it rigorously, that magic will happen. And believe you me, that is a really tough mindset for federal employees to embrace, as I'm sure that I imagine you've witnessed in potentially some projects you've worked on in that space. Generosity, this is public service. It's core to what we do. So I found that the more generous we can be with our contribution, our time, our expertise, great things happen as a result. And as I mentioned earlier, COVID exposed some horrific systemic brokenness in our society. And as a systems designer, this has really become an exciting opportunity for us to really reimagine how those systems can come together, and how the machinery of federal government can potentially reorient itself to be more human-centered. So as I mentioned, I'm not an expert in federal government. I have only been in government for about 18 months. So which is probably about 10 minutes by certain federal government standards. So this is really, my perspective from throughout this 18-month period as an outside innovator coming into government, thinking about these challenges. What is clear, as I just mentioned, I don't know that our systems were designed to help us. I don't know that the systems were designed with the end user in mind. But that said, government is comprised of brilliant, innovative, caring, impact-driven people that are just hungry for improved systems and services to help enable new behaviors and new processes. So it's not an indictment on some of the systems. It's that we're talking about hundreds of years of of kind of antiquated methods. So this is just a quick snapshot of one specific project that a research team worked on during COVID to better understand how American citizens navigated the application experience to get unemployment benefits. And some people had to wait on hold for a full day. That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. If we want a healthy and thriving society, we need to do more to enable systems that are less burdensome and more reliable. Another revelation is I don't want this talk to be just an indictment on bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is really in place to protect us in a lot of instances. Where I do find challenges and I see opportunity is acknowledging that sometimes there's a complacency and a lack of imagination. And I think we need to bring more imagination to our systems design methodology. This is a big one too, and I think oftentimes, not all the time, folks inside of government assume that technology will solve the problem and that technology is the answer. And I think that while technology can be innovative, I think that it's really about a mindset and a set of behaviors that the more we can do to orient ourselves more elegantly around that technology so that it's sustainable, I think the outcomes will be much better for citizens. So what was clear is government can't solve these challenges alone. There's every best intention, certainly across all the communities that I've had the privilege of working with. And also I've noticed that the tech industry sort of the mavericks of Silicon Valley, they're just not going to save us based on their existing models. However, what I've observed is that if we are working in concert across sectors against a shared design challenge, I really think that there could be a profound impact on the other side. This is an interesting one too, that again, I don't want to indict all federal contractors. I think they are coming from a place of support, but they were also part of a system that has made government reliant on them. And I think this is like a time to really revisit how we scope projects more effectively that are really about outcomes and not just about contract conversion, right? So how can we really come together to think about what the future of procurement is in federal government, so that when contractors come in, they are doing so with the intention of embedding new skills and upskilling federal workforce so that the solutions are more sustainable. We're not starting from scratch, and based on some research that I've conducted, there are real models of inspiration here. And the first one I always point to, and this is a uniquely American example, but in the early 60s, President Kennedy gave this amazing speech that was all about inspiring citizens, American citizenry, to raise their hands to join the federal workforce across. And really, there are two prime examples of the window of opportunity that this speech led to. One was Peace Corps. So on the heels of this speech, there was a humanitarian movement, and on the other hand was NASA, which really inspired some of our best and brightest STEM minds to raise their hands and come in and build rockets, and really sort of apply that expertise to an exciting technological future. And this is one of my favorite quotes from that speech. And we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. And that is really my hope, is that leadership in government can tap into that sort of collective impact that we're really hungry for. And democracy, I think we should really rethink democracy beyond the sort of standard voting and jury duty. That I think there are civic engagement sort of models and actions we can take to really rethink what we mean when we say we are part of a healthy democratic society. And it's really hard to do now, as this is a recent study conducted that public trust in democratic institutions in America is at 17%. When Kennedy gave that speech in 1961, it was at 80%. So we need to do a lot of work to regain public trust in democratic institutions, so we really can enable more collaboration and more creative partnerships. Another interesting model, and this was from the 80s, where private industry law firms were able to do tours of duty at the Department of Justice and other federal legal communities in a pro bono capacity. It was sort of a quid pro quo, and so there are definitely mechanisms that we can draw from. Another really interesting conversation that we've been having is, what if we formalized civic leave and tech leave at the Facebooks, Googles, Microsofts of the world, where their workforce could do a tour of duty in the federal space, work on really impactful projects, and then have their jobs waiting for them on the other side. Think about what that might look like at your organizations, because I really think that in order to strengthen certainly our society, that this is a model that we should really explore and consider. And we've been thinking about it from corporate social responsibility, which I'm sure you're really familiar with, to corporate civic responsibility. What might that look like? This is an interesting story of the early 90s, and when Vice President Al Gore realized that government was quite siloed. So he created what was called the National Partnership for Reinventing Government. And what that enabled was a sort of community of practice around certain disciplines where agencies were working more collaboratively around some of these problems, where they realized that human beings, citizens, don't experience government services in a vacuum. There's an opportunity to enable more cross-agency collaboration. And we call those agencies high-impact agencies, and agencies that delivered services that everyday citizens experienced very frequently. So this community sort of foretold a lot of really exciting cross-agency experiences in government. This is the program I'm a part of that Chris mentioned earlier. So I don't know how many non-Americans are familiar with the story. It was pretty famous, but after what was called the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2012, the Obama administration realized that now that they had sort of runway to enable American citizens to be able to register for health insurance, affordable health insurance through this exchange platform, they had to build the technology to be able to do that. And what happened in a spectacular failure was the system crashed almost instantly. It was a really sobering moment in American government history for them to realize that they were not modern. And what they did was they brought in private industry technologists to bring the system back online. And the insight there was that they should really codify this program. And on the other side of this, that they not only did they start to formalize tours of duty with technologists, but really grow that to bring in subject matter experts for those tours of duty beyond just technology. So in my background's organizational design, I work with data scientists and AI experts. So it's a really vast sea of talent that is now coming into government to really build innovation infrastructure. We are in the wake of all this, while I'm very proud of this work and proud to be a part of it, is really a drop in the bucket. And we are, I don't know if this is true in Australia as well, but 6% of the current federal workforce is under the age of 30, and 74% will be of retirement age in the next 10 years. As far as I'm concerned, that is a talent crisis. And if we are not replenishing our federal workforce with really dynamic talent, government's going to fail. So a lot of what I've been trying to inspire in like these talks and beyond is, how can we reimagine civics education in the United States so that upstream of all of these conversations, we help middle schoolers, high schoolers see themselves in a public service career narrative in a way that does not feel like this huge sacrifice, but feels like a really compelling, exciting, fulfilling career path. And I think there's this myth that private industry holds a monopoly on innovation, and what I've seen in government, that there's a tremendous amount of innovation. It's just not being broadcast in the same way. Here's some encouraging efforts in the last 5 minutes I have. So one of the first projects I worked on as a Presidential Innovation Fellow was working with this amazing organization within Department of Veterans Affairs to help them think about how they can better understand the unmet needs of veterans, of which there are 20 million in the United States. So this office essentially is an insights engine that works with the entire VA to analyze data, quantitative data, more effectively through survey channels and call centers, but also use the insights from that data to create customer journey maps. This is what really inspired me to work for this organization, is that they're really thinking about this end-to-end veteran experience from discharge to death, and really isolating all these moments that matter that they can bring human-centered design in to help solve. Another one, this is a really inspiring movement happening right now that's still, it's only 4 years old, but we're currently working with the White House, the Office of Management and Budget, to help think about how customer experience practices can be scaled across all of government to help every federal agency better mature and strengthen their service design and customer experience capabilities. So we've been creating all of the guidance and all of the models to help them really evolve as service delivery organizations. And as you all know, as design enthusiasts, the more empathy we can bring into sort of these CX models, that can fundamentally change the culture and community of federal workforce as well. And that is really exciting. And here's, if you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can go to www.performance.gov/CX, and that will give you kind of an overview of the tapestry of projects that we've been working on to help really sort of scale this initiative. The last example I'm going to give, and then we can dismount into a conversation, is the Opportunity Project that sits within the U.S. Department of Commerce. And within the Department of Commerce is an organization within Census that essentially has created this really robust innovation platform. It's an open innovation tool and platform that leverages census data for federal problem solving, essentially. So they scope these really interesting projects. They have public data, and then they invite interdisciplinary teams to solve these challenges. So I'm going to leave you all with that case study, and really with this sentiment. I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, COVID has exposed a lot of challenges, but it has also presented an opportunity for us to work in a more dynamic, human-centered, and cross-sector manner. So thank you all. And there's my email, and I'm going to stop my share here. Cool.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was really very insightful presentation. Really appreciate that. And guys, given that we do not have too much of time left, but if you want to type your questions, I could already see one question coming through. But I really like, Scott, the way you have given us some revelations and then opportunity on on those revelations. A lot of time we forget about those things. Is really good. And I think you mentioned about the mindset, which is very critical, because we have, for example, we are also collaborating with a number of federal agencies here in Australia, and it's really insightful, kind of revelation that you have given. I think one of the opportunity, I would say, in terms of the mindset will be, because we know that when there is a prime minister or a president, when they are giving directions, that is entirely a different thing. But on the other hand, on day-to-day basis, the people who are working on ground, especially at the director level and assistant secretary level and those kind of executives, those are the ones who are making most difference, right, in this, because they are driven by themselves. They are not driven by directions from, the presidents and the prime ministers. And that is where I see there's a lot more opportunity to bring those kind of people together to kind of create a movement, even a collaboration movement between Australia and United States in this context. So we would be definitely very, very keen to pursue that. Let me take the first question. What changes are you seeing in government contracting and procurement? Have there been changes to assist SMEs and build local capabilities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that has actually come up very recently in the wake of an executive order that was signed by our current administration around advancing racial equity. So when we think about equity and access, we don't just think about that in terms of the diversity of our federal workforce. We also think about that as in terms of what businesses, small businesses, minority-owned businesses, subject matter experts can more easily access government contract vehicles. What I've observed is, as I'm sure this is true in your government as well, there are these big agencies that have more resources and more access points to be able to win that work. Now they're trying to really rethink procurement with a lot of intention and a lot of creativity, and figure out some loopholes and workarounds to enable small businesses to be able to compete more significantly. So that is definitely a huge step that's being taken right now that I'm really excited about.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. And given that we are already over time, we really appreciate your time. And I'm sure that we will be in touch and we will be talking to you more about collaborating, especially between Australia and United States.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, feel free to email, feel free to send me a LinkedIn note. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much, Scott. Looking forward to it.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening.